I'm not exaggerating when I say this. 2026 might be the most chaotic, overloaded, and absolutely unfair year for TV in a long time. Because it's not just, oh cool, a couple of big shows are coming back. No, we're talking major finales, franchise expansions, 4-year waits finally ending, and at least one project that's either going to be a masterpiece or a spectacular faceplant. And the best part, some of these shows are set up to ruin your sleep schedule on purpose. So here's what we're doing today. I'm Demi, this is Frame Drop, and I'm going to walk you through the most anticipated series of 2026, the ones people are already counting down for. But I'm warning you right now, the list gets bigger, weirder, and more unhinged as we go. Also, quick game, while you're listening, keep a mental top 3, because I'm gonna ask you at the end, and I wanna see if we're the same kind of sick. Alright, let's build the 2026 watch list. Let's start where the internet always ends up anyway, Westeros. It's because the world of ice and fire is about to expand in 2 different directions, and the first one is a Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Now, if you're expecting the end of the world is coming, zombie apocalypse, everyone's doomed energy, I need you to adjust your expectations. This story is smaller, more grounded, more personal, and honestly, that might be exactly why it works. Because instead of, here's a giant map, here are 50 factions, it's more like, here's a man, here's a code, here's the messy reality of living inside a kingdom that eats people. And yeah, if you love the political knives in the dark stuff, you're still eating. Targaryen shadows, court intrigue, quiet betrayals. It's still Westeros, and from what's been floating around, the confidence behind this one looks real. Like, we already see where this is going, real. So if you've been missing that classic gritty human scale Game of Thrones flavor, this might be the one that scratches it. But if you're like, Demi, I don't want cozy medieval character work. I want dragons and blood and somebody yelling in Valyrian. Don't worry, half a year later, House of the Dragon comes back with season 3, and I feel like we all already know what the pitch is. More battles, more dragons, more characters making one decision that's so bad you actually have to pause and stare at the wall. And look, no spoilers. If you know what part of this story we're entering, then you know the vibe is basically, who do you love? Cool, now watch. The big tease for season 3 is that it's expected to open with a massive sea battle, the kind of set piece Westeros hasn't really gone all out on in this era. And apparently this is the battle they wanted to do earlier but had to shift around, so the expectation is they're going to come back swinging. And here's the funny thing about House of the Dragon, even when it slows down, even when it's just people in rooms talking, it still feels like someone is loading a weapon, because every conversation has stakes. Every compliment is a threat. Every "we should do what's best for the realm" is code for "I'm about to ruin your family tree." So yeah, if 2026 starts with a grounded Westeros story, and then 6 months later drops a dragon-fueled political war, that's not a year, that's a trap, and it gets worse. Because now we have to talk about one of the most gleefully violent shows on television. Okay, deep breath. The Boys is heading into its final season, and you already know what that means. Everything gets uglier, everything gets louder, and somebody is going to do something so insane it becomes a meme before the episode even ends. But what actually makes the final season exciting isn't just more gore, it's that the end is genuinely hard to predict, even if you know the comics. Because the show has been doing its own thing for a while now. Different choices, different arcs, different outcomes. So we're not walking into a finale where everybody can pretend they already know what happens. And that uncertainty, that's the good stuff. Plus, this is where it gets personal for a specific type of viewer, because if you grew up in the era of Supernatural, you know the showrunner loves his reunions. And the idea of familiar faces colliding in the world of The Boys is the kind of meta fan service that actually works when the writing is sharp. The real question is, what does the end look like for a show built on escalation? Because when you've spent seasons proving there's no line you won't cross, how do you top yourself without collapsing into pure chaos? And maybe that's the point. Maybe it has to collapse. Maybe the ending has to feel like the system finally eating itself. Either way, I'm gonna be there. But we're not done with dark superhero stuff. Not even close. This one is either going to be the coolest thing ever, or the weirdest thing you've watched all year? Spider-Noir, Nicolas Cage, live action, set in an alternate 1930s New York. If that sentence doesn't trigger at least a little curiosity, I don't know what to tell you. The vibe here is aging detective hero, smoky streets, moral rot, and a city that feels like it's always raining. Cage has already voiced this version of the character in animation, but seeing him embody it physically, that's the draw. And the big question is whether the show leans into the noir side, the mystery, the dread, the loneliness, or if it becomes another franchise content machine where the aesthetic is just a coat of paint. Because I'm telling you right now, if they commit to the noir, this could be special. And if they don't, well, we'll always have the concept. Alright, now let me pivot from capes to fists, because 2026 also wants to punch you in the face. So far, the John Wick universe outside the main movies has had a mixed reception. Some of it works, some of it gets lost, but 2026 is lining up another attempt to pull us deeper into the world of assassins, this time focused on what happens after the events of Chapter 4. And the reason I'm paying attention is simple. When the right people are involved, when the action language is consistent, when the world rules feel sharp, when it's stylish without being empty, this franchise hits like nothing else. The rumored hook here is that we're not following one single hero the entire time. Instead, it's a power struggle. Multiple perspectives, different criminal bosses, parallel stories colliding, which is smart, because the continental world is bigger than one man. And if they nail the tone, if they actually make the world feel dangerous and mythic again, then this could be the John Wick TV project that finally sticks. But if it turns into random hitmen doing random things, it's going to evaporate. So I'm cautiously excited. Cautiously. And speaking of stylish crime, Guy Ritchie doing young Sherlock just makes sense. Because his entire brand is fast talk, slick editing, swagger, and characters who act like they're always one step ahead, even when they're not. And this isn't meant to be tied to the Robert Downey Jr. movies. It's a different interpretation, more of a coming-of-age angle, how a brilliant kid becomes the legend. Now, here's the danger. When you do young version of an iconic character, it can feel like a checklist. Here's the hat, here's the mannerisms, here's the catchphrase. But if they treat it like a real story, like a kid sharpening himself into something dangerous, then we're talking. Because Sherlock as a concept is basically a mind that can't stop, a person who turns observation into a weapon, and a life that gets lonelier the smarter you get. If Ritchie leans into that and still keeps the fun, that's a hit. Now, let's jump forward, way forward, because 2026 has neon on the menu. Okay, I'm going to say it, Blade Runner is sacred territory. You don't just make more Blade Runner, you have to earn it. So the idea of Blade Runner 2099 is exciting and terrifying. The timeline is set after the most recent film era, pushing the world forward. And the big promise is that it's going to keep the aesthetic, those rainy streets, that slow dread, that existential weight. And on paper, the casting alone makes it feel like they're not treating this casually. But here's the real question. What is Blade Runner without that deliberate, almost mournful pacing? TV loves cliffhangers. TV loves binge hooks. Blade Runner loves atmosphere. So if they can fuse those, if they can make you desperate for the next episode while still letting the world breathe, this could be incredible. And if they can't, then it becomes another franchise that didn't know when to stop. No pressure. Now let's swing back to a street level hero, because somehow this one survived the Disney machine. I'll admit it, I was nervous. When Daredevil moved ecosystems, the fear was obvious. What if it gets softer? What if it loses the bite? What if it turns into a sanitized version of itself? But the thing is, it held onto its identity, and season 2 has a couple of big carrots dangling. 1, the potential return of Jessica Jones, which if that happens, changes the entire vibe. 2, a bigger focus on the people around Matt, because this story works best when it's not just fists, it's consequences. And of course, if you're bringing back Kingpin energy and you're not afraid of letting the action go long and brutal, then I'm in, because Daredevil works when it feels like every punch costs something. And I want that. Now, time for something completely different. A show that was a surprise hit because of a very specific format. If you missed the Pitt, here's why people wouldn't shut up about it. The gimmick sounds simple. Each episode is 1 hour of a single ER shift, but the execution is what made it work, because that structure forces the story to be relentless. No filler, no wandering, just crisis after crisis, mixed with personal drama that doesn't feel like a soap opera. It feels like survival. Season 2 being on the way makes sense. And what I'm most curious about is whether they keep the same tight approach, or whether success tempts them into expanding the formula. Because the format is the hook. Lose the hook and you lose the magic. But if they deepen the characters while keeping that ticking clock, we're talking must watch. And while we're on the subject of hospitals, we need to talk about a return that feels like an entire era showing up at your door. Listen, there are reboots nobody asked for, and then there are reboots that make people go, wait, are we actually doing this? The idea of the original Scrubs crew coming back, older, tired, still joking to survive, could either be a warm hug or a painful reminder. Because Scrubs worked when it could be hilarious and devastating in the same breath. And if they can recapture even a piece of that balance, I'm interested, especially if they treat it like both a continuation and a soft reset. Familiar faces, new interns, new chaos. The key is respect. Don't just do nostalgia, do a story. Okay, now let's talk about a show that already had people begging for new episodes for years. And yes, it's been that long. 4 years. That's how long the wait has felt. And the most interesting thing about Euphoria Season 3 isn't just it's back. It's that the story is expected to shift, because you can't stay in high school forever. And once these characters age out of that bubble, the show has to evolve into something else. More adult problems, different kinds of danger, different kinds of exploitation. And if the show leans into the reality of online identity, money, attention, the pressure to turn yourself into content, then it could hit harder than the earlier seasons. But it's also a risky move, because Euphoria lives and dies by tone. If it nails it, it's going to dominate conversation. If it misses, the backlash will be loud. Now, let me cleanse the palate, because we need something with heart. Something with optimism, something that makes you want to call your friends. I genuinely didn't expect Ted Lasso to come back. The story felt complete, so when Season 4 got talked about, my first reaction was, okay, why? But then you remember, this show built a fan base on feeling. People don't just watch Ted Lasso for jokes. They watch it to feel like the world could be nicer. The new angle being teased is that Ted takes on a women's team, which is a smart way to shift the dynamic without repeating the exact same beats. And yeah, some characters might not fit that new setup, but that's also where the opportunity is. New faces, new problems, same heart. All I want is for them to avoid the trap. You know the trap when a show comes back because it's popular, not because it has something to say. If Season 4 has a real story, I'm there. Now, from comfort to confusion, because we have to talk about a show that asks questions faster than it answers them. If you're watching From, you know exactly what I mean when I say this. Every time you think you understand the rules, the show adds new rules. And it doesn't add them gently. It adds them like it's throwing bricks at your head. Season 4 is coming, and I'm excited, but I'm also scared. Because I want answers, but this show is built on mystery, and the more it expands, the more it feels like it could either become the next great long-form puzzle, or the kind of puzzle that forgets what the picture was supposed to be. The upside is that the creative DNA here comes from people who understand the appeal of what the hell is going on storytelling. The downside is, sometimes those stories never land the plane, so I'm watching Season 4 like I'm watching someone defuse a bomb, with my hands over my eyes. Alright, let's talk monsters. The MonsterVerse TV experiment actually worked more than I expected. And Season 2 of Monarch Legacy of Monsters is where it needs to level up. The tease is that we should get a bigger role for Kong and more exploration of the Hollow Earth side of the mythology. And that's good, because the best MonsterVerse stories are the ones that treat the human drama as a bridge to the real spectacle. Give me characters I can tolerate, then give me creatures that make me feel small. Also, the timeline stuff in this corner of the universe gives them a fun tool. They can connect dots, they can build toward bigger crossover events. So Season 2 has the chance to feel like a real piece of a larger puzzle. Now, speaking of bunkers and long-term puzzles, Silo is one of those shows where every answer creates 3 new questions, and Season 3 is expected to be the one that finally starts opening the lid, at least a little. We're moving toward the truth behind the system. Who built it? Why? And what's actually outside? And because the story is marching toward an endgame, the pressure is higher, because there are two kinds of mystery shows. One kind is a slow burn that rewards patience. The other kind is a slow burn that stalls. Silo needs to prove it's the first kind. Now let's switch genres again, because 2026 is also trying to revive your love for modern Western television. I'm going to say something controversial. Yellowstone's late game turbulence was noticeable, and you could feel the show wrestling with real-world production choices. So the idea of a spin-off focusing on Case Dutton as a federal marshal, that's a clean premise. New structure, new conflicts, less of the we're holding the entire ranch universe on one storyline pressure. And if it leans into that martial angle, cases, power, corruption, the cost of being the guy who enforces the law, it could find a fresh identity. It's also a chance to restore the vibe that made people obsess over this world in the first place. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Yes, I'm using that phrase again because 2026 is going to test us. Now, we've hit the big pillars, but I've got a rapid-fire batch of honorable mentions, and at least one of them is going to make your comment section explode. The Bear is expected to keep doing what it does, stress you out, make you hungry, and somehow win awards while you're still recovering from episode 3. The Rings of Power continues its journey of being simultaneously hated and watched by millions. I don't make the rules. One Piece is still sailing, and if they keep improving, it's going to be one of the rare live-action adaptations that doesn't feel cursed. Avatar: The Last Airbender also has more on the horizon, and I'm still watching like a nervous parent at a school play. For superhero fans beyond what we already covered, there's talk of Green Lanterns and Vision Quest expanding the comic corner of TV in very different directions. And then there's the big maybe that could land late in the year or slide further out. A potential American spin-off connected to Squid Game, with a heavy hitter filmmaker name floating around. If it happens, it'll be everywhere. If it doesn't, people will still argue about it like it aired. So yeah, that's the 2026 TV landscape as it's shaping up right now. And I need to know two things from you. First, what's your #1 most anticipated show? Not the one you think is objectively best, the one you're personally going to drop everything for. Second, what did I miss? Because every year there's at least one dark horse nobody's talking about, and then it becomes the show everybody pretends they discovered first. Drop your 2026 watch list in the comments, and if you want, rank them. If you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe to Frame Drop, and I'll see you in the next one.